After the age of 50, adults lose between 1 and 2% of their muscle mass every single year. By 65, the average person has lost enough muscle to cut their resting metabolism by nearly 300 calories per day. That is not a gradual decline. It is a collapse, and most of the people experiencing it are making it significantly worse with the exact habits they believe are helping them. One of these 5 mistakes is one that almost every fitness expert recommends specifically for people over 50. Not only is it failing to help you, it is actively accelerating muscle loss. I will tell you exactly which one before this video ends. Mistake 1. Training too often without enough recovery. The most common mistake people over 50 make when they decide to get serious about fitness is doing too much, too frequently. They hit the gym 4 or 5 days in a row, feel the soreness they associate with progress, and interpret that as a sign the approach is working. It is not. After 50, the muscle repair process slows down significantly. Muscle protein synthesis, the biological mechanism your body uses to rebuild damaged muscle fibers after a workout, takes considerably longer to complete. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research found that adults over 55 required between 72 and 96 hours to fully recover from a heavy resistance training session. Adults in their 20s recover in 24 to 48 hours from the same session. This matters because muscle is only built during recovery, not during the workout itself. The workout is the signal. Recovery is where the actual construction happens. When you train a muscle group before it has fully recovered, you are not building on top of previous progress. You are tearing down tissue that has not yet finished repairing itself. The result is a net loss. You train hard, feel accomplished, and over weeks of doing this, your strength plateaus and then begins to decline. You are working harder than the average 30-year-old in the gym and getting worse results, and you believe the problem is your age. The problem is the frequency. The research-backed prescription for adults over 50 is heavy resistance training 3 to 4 times per week maximum, with at least 48 hours between sessions targeting the same muscle group. Not because your muscles are fragile, because they need the time to complete the process you started. But training less often only solves part of the problem. Mistake 2 is about what kind of training you are doing when you do show up, and it is the opposite of what most people over 50 believe they should be doing. Mistake 2. Switching to light weights and avoiding heavy resistance. The single most damaging belief in fitness after 50 is the idea that you should switch to lighter weights and higher repetitions to stay safe and avoid injury. This belief is so widespread that most gym goers over 50 have never been told the opposite, but the science is unambiguous. Sarcopenia is the medical term for age-related muscle loss. It accelerates dramatically after 50 and becomes the primary driver of physical decline, loss of independence, and metabolic disease in older adults. The only stimulus that meaningfully slows sarcopenia is progressive resistance training with sufficient load. A landmark 2019 meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine reviewed 49 studies on resistance training in older adults and found that training at 70 to 85% of 1 rep maximum, which means lifting weights that are genuinely challenging, produced 3 times greater muscle preservation than training at lower intensities. 3 times. From the same amount of time in the gym. What this means in practice: if you can comfortably perform 15 or 20 repetitions of an exercise with a given weight, that weight is not heavy enough to stimulate the muscle protein synthesis response your body needs after 50. Your muscles require a genuine challenge to respond. They do not respond to being comfortable. Heavy compound movements, specifically squats, deadlifts, rows, and presses, are not dangerous for adults over 50 who learn proper form. They are necessary. The injury risk from lifting too light, losing muscle, and becoming frail is dramatically higher than the injury risk from lifting with appropriate load and good technique. Therefore, once you have the training frequency and the load right, the next variable is what you are putting into your body to support that training. And mistake 3 is where almost every person over 50 is leaving the majority of their gains on the table. Mistake 3. Not eating enough protein. The standard recommended daily allowance for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. For a 75-kilogram person, that is 60 grams of protein. That number was established as the minimum to prevent deficiency in a sedentary young adult. It is not the optimal amount for an active person over 50 trying to preserve or build muscle. Here is the problem specific to aging. After 50, muscles develop what researchers call anabolic resistance. This means the muscle tissue becomes less efficient at using dietary protein to build new fibers. The same amount of protein that triggers muscle protein synthesis in a 30-year-old produces a significantly smaller response in a 60-year-old. The signal gets weaker with age. The practical solution is straightforward. You compensate by consuming more protein. A 2020 position paper from the International Society of Sports Nutrition concluded that adults over 50 engaged in resistance training should consume between 1.6 and 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. For a 75-kilogram person, that is between 120 and 165 grams per day. Most adults over 50 are consuming between 50 and 70 grams. That is less than half the minimum needed to support muscle preservation under training stress. Protein distribution also matters. Spreading intake across 3 to 4 meals of 30 to 40 grams each produces better muscle protein synthesis than eating the same total amount in 1 or 2 sittings. The muscle can only process so much at once. Frequent smaller doses outperform a single large dose by a meaningful margin. But even with the right training frequency, the right weight, and sufficient protein, Mistake 4 will undo a significant portion of that work because it involves how you execute each individual repetition. Mistake 4. Rushing through repetitions and ignoring the lowering phase. Every resistance exercise has 2 phases. The concentric phase is the lifting portion, when the muscle shortens under load. The eccentric phase is the lowering portion, when the muscle lengthens under load. Most people in the gym spend 1 second on the concentric and half a second on the eccentric, dropping the weight back to the starting position with minimal control. This is a significant mistake for anyone trying to build or preserve muscle. It becomes an especially costly mistake after 50. The eccentric phase of a movement is where the majority of muscle fiber damage and subsequent repair takes place. When a muscle lengthens under tension, it creates microscopic tears in the muscle fibers at a far higher rate than during the concentric phase. Those tears, properly recovered from, are what trigger the adaptation response. They are the signal that tells the body to build more structural tissue. A 2017 study from Edith Cowan University in Australia compared identical resistance training programs with the only variable being eccentric control. The group performing 3 to 5 second eccentric phases developed 40% more muscle thickness over 12 weeks than the group performing the same exercise with no eccentric emphasis. Same exercise, same load, same frequency. 40% difference from slowing down the lowering phase. For adults over 50, the implication is direct. On every pressing movement, every row, every squat or deadfall, count 3 seconds on the way down. That single adjustment increases the training stimulus without adding a single extra set or additional gym session. This leads to mistake 5. And this is the one I mentioned at the beginning. The mistake that the fitness industry actively recommends for people over 50, the one that is doing the opposite of what people believe. Mistake 5. Training in a fasted state. Fasted cardio and fasted training have been promoted for decades as an effective strategy for burning fat. The logic sounds reasonable. Exercise before eating, force your body to burn stored fat for fuel, and accelerate fat loss. For people in their 20s with high muscle mass and robust hormonal responses, this approach carries some validity as a fat loss strategy. After 50, it causes measurable muscle loss. Here's what happens physiologically. When you exercise in a fasted state, your body needs fuel. In younger adults with higher muscle mass and more efficient hormonal signaling, the body preferentially burns fat during low to moderate intensity fasted exercise. But after 50, the hormonal environment shifts dramatically. Testosterone and growth hormone decline significantly, and cortisol, the stress hormone, becomes proportionally more dominant. In a fasted state, elevated cortisol promotes a metabolic process called gluconeogenesis, where the body converts amino acids from muscle tissue into glucose for fuel. Your body is literally breaking down muscle to feed the workout you are doing in an attempt to preserve that muscle. The harder the training session, the more pronounced this effect becomes. A 2022 study from McMaster University tracked 2 groups of adults over 55 performing identical 8-week resistance training programs. One group trained fasted, one group consumed 30 grams of protein 30 minutes before training. At the end of 8 weeks, the fed group gained an average of 1.4 kilograms of lean muscle. The fasted group gained 0.2 kilograms. Both groups trained identically for 8 weeks. The only variable was a protein drink before the session. The recommendation for adults over 50 is straightforward. Consume 25 to 30 grams of protein 30 to 45 minutes before any resistance training session. A simple protein shake, a serving of Greek yogurt, or 2 to 3 eggs accomplishes this. That one change, applied consistently, removes the single biggest hormonal barrier to muscle preservation after 50. Tonight, identify which of these 5 mistakes applies to you. If you are training more than 4 days per week, cut back. If you are using the same weights you used last year and they feel comfortable, increase the load. If your daily protein intake is under 100 grams, start tracking it. If you rush through the lowering phase of every rep, start counting 3 seconds on the way down. And if you are training first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, eat something with protein before you begin. One change, applied consistently, is worth more than 5 changes applied occasionally.